Hello, welcome to episode 7 of the Average Lockdowncast. On this episode, we're going to be discussing how to get into bolt action and what got us into it. Hello, I'm Ian.
I'm Ben. I'll go next. Yeah, we got no order sorted on this again, have we? So yeah, I'm Ben.
I'm
Gary.
And I'm Sven.
After
Yes.
7 episodes, you would think we would have
It's because we change order. We change order on screen every time we do this.
Do you know what? I've just noticed
Or
that
we do to me.
on the screen it's actually the wrong way around, so I'm just going to quickly fix that because normally every week we're in exactly the same position that we are. So right now, any viewers that are confused, that's now corrected on the screen as to the namings. So right, that's sorted.
Was I not Ben for a bit there?
No, you were Ian for a bit, I think, but on the
Oh.
on the fly editing, that's how we operate here. So
we're very
Something is-
average.
You speak for yourself. Right, what are we doing tonight?
so yeah,
So we are talking about bolt action, how to get started, what you need to get started, and how we all got into it and how long we've been doing it, or something like that.
yeah, so as I was saying, like before we got on the recording here, that something that I've been wanting to do for a while is a kind of a getting started, a get playing style video, which is something we did in the early days of the channel. We did like a get playing for a couple of different games. Here's what you
I
need
remember
if you
those
want to
days.
start playing. Back in the heady days of the channel starting when it was
YouTube stardom.
yeah.
In the pre-corona days.
Oh, this is going back to early 2018 when we started doing these kind of things, which doesn't seem that long
Almost
ago, but
Almost
That was a different
pre-SARS.
government. That was
Yeah.
a different government back then.
So yeah, so we said because we all play bolt action, it's something we've been talking about a lot recently. In terms of the fact that we want to play some games of bolt action, and we've been talking about doing a little mini D-Day based campaign when we get out of lockdown, and we can set up a game using some of the stuff that we've got. So yeah, we figured we'll just start off with like what to start. I mean, obviously, anybody that's watching this that has never heard of bolt action, I guess, go and have a look at Warlord's site. But it's from Warlord Games, World War II, 28mm war game. That's all you really need to know. Really well. I mean, the thing about bolt action that I've always liked in terms of their game is how much extra information and stuff they put into the game, how much extra detail. Because I've played some World War II games in the past that have just been, it's essentially just a war game reskinned, and there's no differentiation between, an English soldier and a German soldier or a US Marine or a whatever. It's just a case of here you go. Like I think back in the early days, in like kind of late 90s when I was playing 1/72 scale stuff, we were using a set of rules called rapid fire, which
Yeah,
was
I
very
remember
quick,
rapid
and
fire.
it was very quick, and it didn't really, as far as I remember, it was designed for quick play. I think it wasn't really designed for historical accuracy, whereas I think Warlord have kind of straddled both sides of the fence on that, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I think for me, I'm very similar to that in that I always wanted to get into historical gaming more than I did, and World War II seemed like a natural entry point for me. But whenever I read rules like Chain of Command or Rapid Fire, they just didn't appeal to me, and none of the representational aspect I never enjoyed. Like in Chain of Command, it was like you have this many guys, and it represents like 2 companies, and I'm like, but that one miniature could just be one guy on this tabletop. Why aren't I fighting a company level action? So I think like the scale for historical gaming back in the 80s and 90s when I wanted to start playing it, I just didn't appeal to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah.
like, so carry on, Ben.
Oh, go on. Oh no. Yeah. So for me, I was going to ask a question. Do you think that the reason that the bolt action rules have that differentiation and things like that is it to do with the history and the background of the guys that run Warlord and that wrote bolt action and where they came from?
Absolutely.
Because I mean, I certainly feel is relevant to that. Having worked so much on the big companies' games, like they have done, that they've come in and they've seen a way to make a historical war game actually have that little bit of character that's lacking in so many other historical games. You know, I tried Napoleonics once, and it was
Oh.
just pushing round a block of 100 guys who were all the same,
Yeah.
and into a block of 100 guys who were all the same, and you're just like, this is dull.
So without going into too much, or taking us too far off the beaten track, but for people like myself who don't, so where have the guys who set up Warlord? Where have they come from? Are they kind of
Workshop.
GW?
Yeah,
Is it
pretty much
ex-GW
all
people? Yeah.
GW. Yeah.
John Stallard, who owns Warlord Games, I think him and Paul Sawyer, he's more recognisable to the general public, but John Stallard is big in wargaming terms. If you know anything about like Games Workshop and how it operates,
Yeah.
and John is a huge hell of a character, very interesting chap, and a generally all round nice guy, but a ruthless businessman at the same time. And I think him and Sawyer had a trade sales background. He's renowned as the fat bloke, and hey, but actually he came from a sales background and he knows how to sell. And they set up Warlord and they mimicked the Games Workshop model to a degree, but did the things that Workshop were moving away from. So that's how it got started.
And they're part of the big wargaming triangle down in Nottingham.
Yeah, the lead belt.
In the lead belt.
The lead belt, yeah. You know, them and various other companies that are all based down there.
The other thing it gave them is they had a rich pool of talent to draw from. There's people who already knew how to cast models. They already knew people how to sell toy soldiers, people who knew how to do box design, people who knew how to do warehousing and supply. You know, there's a rich infrastructure for wargaming down there, and they were just able to go, he was great, let's have him. He was great, let's have him. And that's part of where the success is.
I think there's also, again, I don't know what the official tie-in was, but one of the things that originally when I first saw the stuff from Bolt Action was the artwork in the books. Because when I was a kid, I used to go to the library, you know, the local like council library, and I used to like love taking out those books with that color plate like illustration, like those old Osprey books. And I've got a stack of them. I've got a stack of them behind us that I've bought at various secondhand bookshops over the years. And you know, like the artwork that you got in the Warlord book was so evocative of that. I think that was something. And again, I know that was. I don't know if did they have an official tie-in with Osprey, or is it that because I know they sell Osprey books.
They do now. They do now because I think is it Osprey now own Wargames Illustrated, one of the UK's premier wargaming magazines.
I think it's that way round, yeah.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of crossover, and I think Warlord have been very canny in the fact that they've tied in with them, and it's given them a lot better exposure. And for me, Wargames Illustrated's gone from being a bit rustic. It's a lot slicker these days. If you read Wargames Illustrated, it's a lot better read. It's more, it's less cluttered with bad adverts and some hokey homemade writing, and it actually feels like it's got professional writers and proper layout and design to it. So I like it now.
Yeah, I think it's just another part of the evolution of the hobby. You know, we spoke the other week about what Games Workshop is doing to kind of really bring the hobby up to date, and I think Warlord and that Warlord Osprey War Games Illustrated kind of collaboration with Rebellion Publishing as well and things like this. I think, you know, they're close on the heels in terms of bringing the hobby up to date.
But it's fair to say their bread and butter and their, if you want to call their core game system, and their most renowned is Bolt Action, which we all dearly love.
Yeah,
I think as well the reason why Bolt Action works so well, and there's not a lot of, I think there's a lot of war games that can do this, is that as much as we just talk about the historical accuracy, and this is probably where, you know, we'll look at Ian a bit more, is it's got scope for tournament play. And so there's quite a big, you know, tournament scene. There's a regular kind of games day that goes on near us, the Guns Over the River Blythe kind of game that gets run every now and then. You know, these little 500 and 750 point armies, and you know, is because they've said, you know, if you want to play in a particular scenario, in a particular theatre, really, you know, they've got the theatre selectors and that, or you can, like, you know, you've got the scope to basically tournament your army. which means
Yeah,
you
yeah.
are always going to get that kind of element of the beard factor coming in, where someone will, as you always say, like, have your German infantry unit that's just full of STGs and things like that, and
If you read when Bolt Action First Edition, it did tap into there's a big vibrant tournament scene over in America, and America's often overlooked because of its geography. It's a struggle for hobbyists because you know a few people in your town and you're going to be okay. But for some hobbyists, they've got to travel a hell of a distance to go and get a game.
Mm.
So when they do go for a game, they'll go for a big tournament weekend, or they'll go and spend like Historicon and stuff like that. They'll go over that, and they're there for days, because they
Yeah,
make
yeah.
a huge event out of it. And I remember reading all the stuff. It was like a huge draw for tournaments because it was accessible as a tournament game. And I'll touch on it later, but it's a part of the gaming aspect for Bolt Action that I don't like, and why I don't like some of the army lists as well. But I'll touch on that later.
I think bringing us back, because we were talking about how we get into it, not the history of
I think this is
Warlord
nice
and
build up.
Oh, I absolutely think it is, and I think
We've got a
had a good
foundation.
chat there. Just bringing us back into the original theme. So
Such a
you
moderator.
won't be surprised to hear, and I will put some reasons behind this. I think one of the Bolt Action isn't quite like other war games I've played. It's not a 40k. It's not like some of the other systems. I think if you're getting into it absolutely cold, brand new, one of the first things I would suggest you do is find out the kind of people you're going to play with and the groups you've got available to you. Because the four of us are quite lucky. We've built the armies we wanted. We've not metagamed it. We've built what is cool, but some of them are probably theatre accurate, but some probably not so much. But if you're going to play with a group your army must be historically accurate, and we're playing in this theatre, so you can only pick these people. You probably want to know that before you're buying any miniatures.
Yeah,
I mean, just go and buy a bunch of miniatures that are not going to be able to use.
I mean, certainly from my point of view, I'm very much, as much as I like the rule of cool when it comes to building armies, for Warlord, like for Bolt Action stuff, I'm very much, I had an idea, like when I first started putting together my US Airborne, I had an idea of like what I wanted to put in there, and I didn't really do a lot of like in-depth research, and I'm not going to be like to the like the
you're not a rivet
yeah,
counter.
I'm not going to go down the thing of rivet counting, or basically building a complete org chart for a particular regiment, and I've not really, I didn't go down, because the easy thing with US Airborne is to go, we're going to do 501st Easy Company and just do the Band of Brothers route.
Yawn.
And you can do that because obviously that's one of the big draws to Bolt Action. You can get Spears and Dick Winters, and you can get those character models if you search hard enough. But yeah, so like as you say, you can do the tournament meta, and I think that it does give you those three prongs of gaming that not a lot of other systems do have. But as Ian was saying there, it is probably one of the first things you're going to need when you're going to start playing is other players, and it's worthwhile. Like since we all kind of came to Bolt Action at the same time, as like wanting to play.
I'd say exactly the same time.
Yeah, I mean,
I was slightly after, because I wasn't going to take part because I didn't want another unpainted
By
army.
slightly after, do you mean half an hour?
No, days.
Yeah, it was.
No, it was the same day.
No, because
it's the same day I started.
Yeah, I mean, I bought my Band of Brothers box, and then we went to Border Reaver the week after.
Yeah.
I know, Gary, you had some stuff earlier, didn't you?
Only a week.
Yeah, I'd built a German army. I did a 5th Division in and around Italy, and I'd bought the first edition rulebook, and I'd enjoyed it. And I've got fond memories of going to war game shows, and I've got horrible memories of going to war game shows as well, because you'll see some beautiful armies and you see some beautiful tables. But good God, are they boring to watch, and good God, are they boring to engage with some of the people playing with them. Wargaming shows in the 90s made it awful. I went to Triples in Sheffield in 1994, and I'll never forget this. There was an Arnhem game which it was the first World War II operation I read up in depth on. I read multiple books on, checked different sources, that kind of thing. And it's the first one I really looked at, and so I've got a fondness in my heart for it. And these guys were playing on this stunning game, beautiful paras, German. Oh, it was amazing, fantastic. And they're using these little coloured, like plastic ring donuts, effectively, and they're putting them on their bases of units. And I said, "Oh, can I ask what are they for?" They went, "We're playing a game, mate. Do you mind?" I was like, "Oh, okay. Sorry, you're a war game show in the public, and I dared to ask you a question." And it just turned me off completely. And I think when you're talking about gamers, I describe us as we're a group of gentlemen gamers. And much as we'll disagree on stuff, it never detracts from us having a really enjoyable game and really getting on. And that's the point of it. It's a, I'll use my old catchphrase I roll out all the time. It's a game about war. It's not a war about a game. And that's the ethos we've got. And if you're a competitive gamer and you want competitive, go for it. But you've just got to be wary about who you're playing with and how you're playing with.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think we're quite lucky. I think so. That's the kind of the almost that three key things is that before you pick up a miniature, and these aren't rules I followed at all. It was know who you're going to be playing with, get a set of the rules, and find out what theatre you're interested in, and maybe pick up one of the theatre books.
Yeah, I
what
think
armies.
we were all definitely more late war because I mean we were all like D-Day plus really when we were looking at armies. So I mean I bought the Band of Brothers box and I'd given Lee the Germans, and Lee was building a small German force at the time, and so we knew that we already had because my initial plan, and I think we mentioned this the other week about the way that we seem to get into games is I said I'll buy the Band of Brothers box and paint it both sides, and then we can just use my stuff if you want. And then a week later, I say we went to Border Reaver, and I bought some extra stuff for the US Airborne, and Ian was like, "Oh, I really fancy some Commando."
No. The story there. So the story to that is I
Ian
bought this
wasn't
German
going to
army.
buy anything. Ian was not going to buy
Ian's
anything.
Ian's wallet was staying firmly in his pocket, and it wasn't coming out to see the light of day. But I bought the German starter box set, the late war grenade. Really good value as well. I found it in a discount store. I think I paid £50 for it, which was a value for it. And as we're walking around, and we stopped at the Warlord stall, and I picked up a box of Commandos. I was looking at this box of Commandos as Ian came over, and I went, "Tell you what, mate, if you buy these, I'll paint them for you." That was it. The Commando Army.
But even then, it was a case of if I only buy the bits for a small skirmish force now.
Yep.
That is all I will buy. So I bought the. Was it 20 I think it was 20 commandos in the box.
It was a box. It was a standard box of commandos, so it was 30 commandos.
Was it 30?
You bought, I think you bought a couple of
two Bren carriers.
Yeah.
I bought the character pack. So Piper
there was
Billy,
a machine gun
Lord
as well.
Lord Love it, yeah.
And a couple of the special weapons teams, and then that was like, there is a tiny little skirmish force. That's enough for me. And if you paint that for me, that'll be great. That'll be lovely.
Yep.
And that is how it began.
Yeah.
I think though that's how everyone begins though. I think and that's the thing for bolt action. The one thing I've always wanted was multi-part plastic British Airborne, crikey, British Airborne, which has been a long-held dream of mine getting my hands on some of those. And lo and behold, Warlord magnificently went and did it. They only went and did it, didn't they? And that's what got me get my Airborne force.
So I guess
absolute swines.
I mean, that's since we're talking about getting started.
Sorry.
I was going to say since we're talking about getting started, I was going to say maybe it is a good place for anyone wanting to get into the game to get started. Is something like one of the boxes that they do where you get a couple of forces either side, and Warlord do a number of boxes like that, but only a couple where you get the rules. So they normally do like a starter box. I think there was one that was called D-Day Firefight that kind of that turned into Band of Brothers.
And then I think there's an Africa one as well, isn't there?
Yeah, where you normally get two small forces. So I think with Band of Brothers it's very much like the old Games Workshop core game. So you got two, like a 25 or 30 US Airborne, and then you got 20 German grenadiers and a
Yeah.
Hanomag.
Half-track.
Yeah, you get a Hanomag. You get a
And a
couple of
mag.
bits of. You get a ruined cottage, bit of
Yeah.
scenery, and then you get the rule book. So you get the little A5 rule book, and you get some orders dice, because that's one of the things.
Which
Obviously,
is the best rulebook.
yeah, the little A5.
The A5
ones.
rulebook is the best one.
Oh yeah.
I wish they'd sell it separately.
But again, if you want to buy the separate rule book, and let's say you don't want you're not going to build German Grenadiers and US Airborne, you could spend more money and buy one of the bigger box sets where you get a lot more stuff, and then buy the rule book separately. So, if you bought Pegasus Bridge or Stalingrad, you'll get 2 different forces, but they're like the 200 quid boxes.
Yeah,
The
there's
one
So
that-
I just
more
want to take it back ever so slightly to what you need to start.
Yep.
You need someone who's willing to be the opposition.
Yeah, so that was the first bit we're talking about, players.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
I mean,
you know,
technically, you could do British against British, but
Training exercise. Yeah.
yeah, it's not great. You want to have
Well, this is where your theatres come in and become problematic, because I think the Imperial Japanese Army and the US Marines armies look fantastic. However, we've all pretty much got mid to late war European armies.
Mhm.
Not Eastern Front. We've gone for Western Front forces. That's predominantly what we've got. And if I decided to collect Japanese now, it's like, hi Gary, you're going to play my German Grenadiers with your Japanese? What?
honestly, that would just be the excuse for my US Marines force that I want to do.
Yeah.
It's already there. I've got some already. I may have picked up a couple of sprues over time, but yeah, it would just be an excuse to do another army.
the problem is this is how bomb burst we are, because we've all got this European. You're now talking about German and American Marines. My next one that I fancy is the LRDG, so I need some Africa Corps to fight against.
Well, I was going to do LRDG stroke SES and DAC next. I was just going to buy them all, but
This
Yeah.
is how you remain poor.
So we've got
And
you
this is how companies work.
need players, you need armies, which we've discussed there. We can go back on the armies a bit later on as well, because there's a lot of depth in there.
I'd also
Yeah.
throw in, if you go to the Warlord website, they do some fantastic deal offerings where you can bundle
Yeah.
together stuff and get yourself a nice little army, very cheap every now and again.
Yeah.
And to be fair, you know what? I'll call it out. But if you compare it against the big name out there, which is Workshop, if you pick up an army for bolt action, which can be 1 character pack, 1 box of infantry, 1 tank, 1 gun, and maybe a blister, you've probably got a decent 1,000-point army there at least. And 1,000 points is about all you need, and you've got a really great company level engagement.
Yeah, so
But
most tournaments are like
the starter
750.
box.
Yeah.
The starter box armies that they do are 1,000-point boxes.
Yeah, and you're
so
looking
like
at
I say,
50,
50
60
quid and I had 1,000 points.
Yeah, and whereas you used to paying for the major competitor out there, you used to paying a lot more. And I think so when
So
people
we can
look at
name
bolt
them.
action- Yeah, no, it's fine. I've already said Workshop. What I
Yeah.
mean? That's fine. I think as a major competitor out there, it's fine. But then again, stick it to another competitor, Battlefront, who do 15mm World War II, and then their figures are dramatically expensive in comparison. And it's, for me, much as I quite like the idea of fielding more tanks, actually, I wouldn't want to scale down. If I'm going to scale down, I'll go all the way to do huge level engagements, and this is where historical gaming, you've got to be careful. This is your planning comes in, because me and Sven have got a little bit of 6mm stuff because I want to do a 6mm rule set for World War II, but it's dead easy to just start snowballing. If Ben started collecting I don't know, a 30 years war army, we might all think, oh yeah, let's do 30 years war in English Civil War, that'd be great, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
I
think
so. Scale, period, era, different company. There's so much diversity in historical wargaming. It makes it a minefield where I think Warlord have got a lot more. It's all balanced throughout that one business, and I like that from them.
And the one thing that I think Warlord have got really correct is their price point as well.
I was just going to say that.
Because their price point is superb. It is really good value for what you get for what you spend. You know,
But
you spend 50 quid and you've got a playable box. You've got a playable force.
So
The
also,
other-
Easily.
I've just brought up their 1,000-point British Army starter set there, which is £90, and they sometimes do deals, so
Yeah.
you often see it for less than that, and that gets you a 1,000-point army, which is 50 infantry, tank, a field gun, and three support weapons. So it looks like you get a machine gun, a mortar, and what's the rubbish British anti-tank weapon?
Piat.
Piat.
Piat. You get a Piat team. You get so much in and it looks like you get a command squad as well.
Well,
50 infantry.
50 infantry, 9 crew.
That's,
You're looking
that's
at-
superb.
Yeah, it's literally it's a full company, and I think
Yeah.
this is the thing. It's like for a 6 foot to 8 foot gaming table, which is what comfortably most people can manage, a company level engagement is doable.
so
Yeah.
And once you start
For
going
less,
over
yeah.
that, it becomes unplayable.
what I was going to say as well is that, and this is where I think bolt action comes into another one of its advantages over something like a Games Workshop game, is because the Warlord stuff is in a common scale, 28mm, and it's not IP limited.
Yeah.
So other people can produce vehicles, and I mean, one of we've raved about this stuff before, like Rubicon,
Yeah.
the stuff they do, and back in the day we did a comparison where I had the two Opel Multia tanks, like the half track
Trucks, yeah, yeah.
Opels, and I did a side by side build in comparison of Warlord versus Rubicon, and we said they're both beautiful models and they were both about the same price, but so the advantage of the Warlord stuff is there's so many different companies out there that'll do different units. So if you don't like a particular pose or the particular type of model that Warlord are doing, there are so many, like countless other companies, and there's even companies that'll doing all of those weird things that like Warlord mentioned in the books maybe, but haven't done a model for. So all the various different variants of Shermans, or all of the Hobart's funnies, or all these weird Russian like the Katyushka type variants where it's just some random tractor with a load of drain pipe on the back that launches rockets.
I'll give you another company with a great pedigree, which if you want a cheap box of plastic models that are exceptional, I'm going to say Perry Miniatures.
Perry Miniatures, yeah.
Perry's
God.
Perry's 8th Army and
US
Africa Corps
Infantry
miniatures are
and Africa
beautiful.
Corps. They're absolutely outrageous.
Well, I've
I mean,
got a few
outrageous
frames
money.
of those from War Games Illustrated. That again, and then I'm just sitting there waiting for me to, get round to actually buying a Dark Army.
Plastic Soldier Company as well.
Yeah, and
Plastic
Yeah,
Soldier
yeah,
Company,
yeah,
their
yeah,
stuff's
they've
really
launched-
good.
Yeah.
So,
And that's it. And for historicals, someone that hasn't got into it, but I think is an underrated company is Victrix. They don't do any World War II, but good lord, you can get a lot of toy soldiers for very limited money
Yeah.
from them.
I've got to
And I
stop.
think
I've got to stop looking. I've got to stop
Yeah.
looking at the Warhorn page.
Stop. So I'll kind
It's always bad when we mention Kickstarter.
So we know there's entry points, and I think we know what's all got us into World War II gaming. We'll have all grew up watching World War II movies as a kid. We'll have all grew up watching, reading Commando comics and Victor Warlord. So I'll ask the question then. So what was it about bolt action compared to the other rule sets? What set that apart for you?
So for me, the thing that I really liked is I love the order dice system. I love the fact that it isn't you go, I go.
Preach.
And
Best thing ever.
Because again, that adds an extra element, and I think it's as much as because Warlord it aims for there's a fine line between realistic gameplay and fun gameplay, and
Cinematic.
yeah, and Warlord goes for that, and so I think the order dice system just adds in that extra bit of chaos of, it's harder to plan your strategies when, as we've had it in, the last game we played, where it was like, we were sitting there as the allies, and it was just like German dice, German dice, German dice, and so you can get that run of luck where. And everything just goes your way in one turn, and you think, oh, we've got it here, and then the next turn it swings back the other way, and then the third turn it might be 1-for-1 out the bag, and that just really simulates that kind of like the momentum shifts of the battlefield, which I really like.
I wish they'd called it. I wish they called it Von Moltke's dice. no plan survives contact with the enemy. Because that's for me, that's what the orders dice does.
And
It gives you that.
It's the great leveler.
yeah, I
Yo.
love that system. Although at first I was really cynical when I saw when I first bought some stuff and I was like, okay, I've got my Band of Brothers box set, and you get an order dice in there, enough to play the game with what you got in the box. And I was like, okay, I'll go and buy some more units. All right, instantly, I've got another add-on purchase that I've got to buy, which is more orders dice. But then I
That's why
realized how much they kind of like add into the gameplay, and
Yeah.
it's one of those necessary evils like glue and paint and stuff that if you're going to war game, you're probably going to have to buy these things, and I accept that for Warlord games I'm probably going to have to buy special dice above and beyond what you get in the starter set.
From a technical standpoint, you could technically use tiddlywinks of different colours, but really you want the orders there so you know what they've done and what you've made them do. That's the only thing that separates it.
The order dice are a really good visual as well. So, you can scan the table when it halfway through a round and go, right, that's gone, that's gone, that's gone. That hasn't gone yet, so that's probably going to be the next one. You can, and you can do that chess moving.
Yeah.
Start planning your
one
rolls.
day we will have a game where for the entire game the correct number of orders dice will be in the bag.
Yeah.
And we won't open it and go, there are 12 units left on the field, so why do we have 42 order dice in the bag?
You're the rules guy. How do you let that happen?
You know how worked up I get about rules about bolt action games. You're
What about you,
having
Ben?
fun wrong!
So what was it that appealed to you about bolt action then, Ben?
So other than that particular dice, the order dice mechanic, which Ben has gone into and we all love so dearly, the actual dice mechanic itself is really, really simple. It does hark back to those early days of 40k back when we all used to play it. It uses that same scale. You hit on a 3, or you hit on a 4, or you hit on a 5, but you can work those numbers out really quickly without having to reference a book, without having to. Is it long range? Yes, no.
Is that
are they behind cover? Yes, no.
I need that to kill him. Yeah.
That for me again is really simple. It's you go right. I pulled my green dice out that says that I go this turn. I'm going to use that unit. I'm going to move them this far, and then I need 3s to hit. I've got 6 hits, and you need 4s to wound. There you go. Boom. Turn done. And that, from a mechanics perspective, is really good. We'll get onto the collecting side in a bit, I'm sure, because I think we're all dead eager to talk about that side of things.
What about you?
But from a mechanics thing, that's it.
What about you, Ian?
So I'll be honest. I mean, we kind of told the tale of how I got hooked with it, Ben often to paint the minis, but it took me a few games to really go, this is something I want to be involved in. Like I did not enjoy our first game of bolt action because it was that kind of I think it was we just picked something out and it started with a preliminary barrage, and you literally go along your arm and you roll a dice, and if you got a certain result, your units could get pinned or they could get damaged, and it didn't go hugely badly, but it didn't go well, and it was just that kind of, we've not even started. I've got my lovely painted toy soldiers in the battlefield, and I've already been slightly hamstrung.
Yeah,
and it was a real kind of gotcha moment. It was kind of, that wasn't fun. There was nothing about that was fun. It might have been historically accurate. It might have been what happened, but it wasn't fun. And it put me in the back foot.
I remember that moment very well.
It put me in the back foot. But I think it was when we started properly playing, as it was about 2 or 3 games later, and it was realizing actually it was how, for want of a better word, how simplistically elegant the whole rule system. The representation of different experience of troops. So your inexperienced troops, and it's totally simple. It's just your inexperienced troops are hit on a 3+, because they're not good at taking cover and they just run around like headless chickens. Whereas your veterans get hit in a 5+ to represent they can keep their head down, they know what they're doing. And it was just such a simplistic way to go and I know leadership and morale comes into it a little bit there as well to represent it, but just that bit was just such a simplistic way to go. Here's the difference between your really cheap, drafted in the last 3 weeks, inexperienced people versus your Fallschirmjäger or your SS or your Paras or whatever else. And the real, it sounds like quite how it sounds, but it really felt as actually horrifying and brutal as I imagine it be. Like films like your more recent war films, your Bands of Brothers, your Saving Private Ryan's, where it's just people just drop like flies. It's not 40k where it's like, oh, armor save, oh, I'm off again, or I've taken my 2 wounds.
It's relentless.
It's just like brrr, 15 guys dead.
Yeah.
Or or an entire unit pinned and not really able to do anything because they've been MG42'd. And it just it's the rule system for me. You won't be surprised. It is just the elegance of what they've captured.
It's like for me. I think the thing for me that appealed to me about it was the breaking a you go I go, which is just so entrenched as a wargaming mechanic, which I've never particularly liked, and I think Bolt Action did it so well. We've touched on that. I think the other one as well is suppression is such a big feature in other World War II games that it does become a game very much of historical actuality where machine guns and mortars rule the battlefield, riflemen were useless. That's very true. It made it cinematic and it made it very playable and engaging. And I wasn't playing a war game; I was playing a war movie in my head, because it just had a wonderful ebb and flow to it. And the pin markers for suppression you could overcome quite easily if you knew what you were doing. And I think that balance to it made it work really, really well.
One final one. It's just something you said there really hammered it home to it. It's the how cinematic. Like touched on, we've all watched war movies as kids and adults, and no end of them. It's all familiar. You know what you're looking at, and it's stupid things like when there was a game, and I think it was Ben or yourself. There was a let's not get away from it. There was a Panzer IV just plopped on one flank. Everyone looked at it and went, "Oh God, I know exactly what that's doing." And it cost them a lot of points, and it did almost nothing during the game. Apart from deny an entire flank because no one would go near the Panzer IV.
That's my Tiger, and that's exactly what it's bought for, and that's exactly all I do it for. I don't care if it doesn't shoot anybody or it doesn't care or kill anything or anything like this. It will sit on a flank. No one goes near it because it is a scary, scary creature.
So, another topic then: painting. How have you sit this one out, Ian? Top of your drink, mate. The dads are talking now. So painting for
it's all right, mate. It's all right, mate.
How have you found it then? How have you found it, Ben?
So the painting, I adore the simplistic color schemes and the fact that everything is painting troops is a joy because they're that natural fibre and flow of fabric makes painting quickly really easy.
Washes and dry brushes combined.
Washes, dry brushes, contrast paints.
Yeah.
That are out there now. You can just go, right, snip, snap, slop, there's a squad of dudes done. The problem with the dudes, and it's something that has been addressed more recently with the upgraded kits from Warlord games, but when they were doing the infantry with separate weapons, putting them together was the worst thing in history.
Yeah.
Genuinely, I mean, that might be a slight overstatement. It was the worst thing that I was doing at that time, I think is a better way of looking at it. They were fiddly, they were tiny, they never lined up properly. I've got a whole squad of that everyone really likes that have got Germans with Stug 44s, which everyone adores. But not a single one of them, the hands are touching the guns properly.
Yeah.
Because of the way that they're designed. I know the later I know with the US infantry redo that they did, they have that more Games Workshop style where the weapons are integrated into hands and things like
Yeah.
this to make it
Yeah.
much easier. So taking that aside, but then painting vehicles. Like my first army was Germans. Painting all of those beautiful German camo schemes was a huge amount of fun. And then when I moved on to doing Americans, everything's olive green. And again, that in itself is really good fun. So and all the decals, I have a great fun in actually working out the proper decals to go on stuff.
I hate the decals because of the size of them. They just do my head in. I just don't use them.
Oh, everything's got number plates. Everything's got, and they've got specifically correct number plates. I don't, even if I've got the same kit with the same transfers, I make sure I don't put the same number plate on different vehicles and things like this.
And I was thoughtful enough to decide I wanted a winter German force. So you got like a different.
I got to do entirely different, and I learnt a whole load of. I mean, that was really interesting actually. Doing that winter force for Ian there, I learnt so many different techniques and new techniques.
You're welcome.
That's and it's and
You're
again
so
that's
giving,
kind of
Ian.
he's so generous.
So for me, coming from like a past of painting guard armies in 40k, painting US Airborne was very close to painting, a guard army. However, and I've just
You could even use them as guard if you wanted to as proxies.
almost, yeah.
Yeah.
But I remember when I was first getting started with painting the US Airborne, I was just doing some paint tutorials. I mean, there might even be behind us. I think there might be next door. I've got some books, which are those really old books where it's like uniforms of World War II, and there's different ones,
Yeah.
and they're all like where it's a photograph that someone's obviously sketched over and colorized. So I've got a load of those books.
I've got a couple upstairs.
Yeah, and I think they're all next door, next to my paint table. That I've collected over the years. I've got a few of those, and I was going through trying to find, okay, what's the best way to do this, and I was still building my paint selection back up again from basically letting a lot of my old workshop paints die out. We're still building up with some new Vallejo stuff. And I watched, he's now Pete the Wargamer, but he was just the Wargamer, I think, at the time. I watched his tutorial where he was like, here's how you paint, and he had Lieutenant Spears. Here's how you paint him, and he's using Army Painter. And I was like, well, I've got Vallejo, so I'll find the equivalent. But the one thing he did, which is really good, is he did like all the canvas webbing and all those bits, and like like the packs, the bit that was on the attached to the helmets and stuff like that. He did all that kind of stuff, and then he used some of the Army Painter washes, and it just changed the colors. And I was like, right, okay, so that was something that I learned. There was how to get those kind of colors and get depth and texture in them, and how good Army Painter's washes are. But yeah, I mean, for me, it's because I've been kind of relearning how to paint again. I've enjoyed painting the bolt action stuff, and I think especially now that from years ago when I was trying to paint World War II stuff using workshop paints, which give everything a bit of a cartoony feel because of how vibrant workshop paints are, to coming now where you've got really good purpose-made sprays. So like I remember buying a tin of I think it was Plastic Soldier Company Dunkelgelb. But
their base coat tins are amazing.
It was like late war Dunkelgelb as opposed to early war and I was like, the difference, and it's not just black primer anymore. You can actually get like red oxide primer spray to put on, and then you use chipping mediums, and so all these extra bits now, and I've really gotten like weathering and using weathering powders and things like that. So I think because the models are so nice and they're in a good scale now to what I used to play World War II with years ago, like say 1/72, it's making me try and get things a little bit more realistic and doing stuff. I mean, some of the best figures I've painted recently have been my Fallschirmjäger, where I gave each unit a little signature, and I kind of went for a mix of like their like the kind of when the the 1940 odd Greece tropical overalls, but then with camo smocks and stuff like that. And I tried to like mix a bit of that in to give them a bit of flavor. And just researching and the camo and learning to paint the camo in 28mm scales being a big thing. It's one of the things I really like about painting the World War II stuff. And then the next big thing is going to be me German Grenadiers. Is going to be getting some contrast paints and trying to paint those with contrast paint and trying some speed painting. And then that's going to be, so one of the next projects I've got sitting there after them is where I've got enough US infantrymen to pretty much do the big red one. And so they're going to be like a speed paint experiment to see if I can paint like 100 odd infantrymen and supporting weapons like in quick time, but not sloppy quick, like as in decent quick with contrasts.
Yeah.
I think I can echo both of elements of what you both said there. I think the one for me is what Sven said there was about the research part of it was for anyone looking to get into bolt action, if you take it from our experience and certainly from things we've looked into, you can find photos out there from actual World War II German uniforms from the whole span of the 6 years of the war, where there's a picture, there's 20 German field tunics. Not one of them's the same colour. You can do the same with the Russian army, the British and the
British army, the American army.
So they had different cloth manufacturers. They had different manufacturers of dyes. They had different manufacturers at different times of the war. They changed the manufacturers, and I think it's one of those where if you're going to get into it, our advice, well, my advice, and I think I'd echo for everyone else, is forgive yourself, because you know what, paint one unit with one colour and change it up on the next unit and mix and match them a little bit, and you're probably getting a better looking army. And the biggest thing you'll find is, and I found this painting my beloved British Airborne, was painting Denison smocks. Was interested in researching that every single Denison smock was technically hand painted at the factory. It was just daubed on, just randomly done by the people working in the factories. Not one Denison smock would look the same. So it was very easy for me to go, I'm actually happy with this looking a bit piecework. The other thing you'll find is, because you're doing true camouflage, your army's going to look quite drab. And I remember having a conversation with a historical wargamer when I first painted camouflage on some Fallschirmjäger years ago. And he came into Games Workshop Newcastle. It was a guy I got on really well with. I said, and I showed him because I had the figures with me. I said, I said, I'm not happy with them. Like, they're really drab. He went, well, that's camouflage. That's what it's meant to do. So when you paint the camouflage well on a 28mm scale model, it should look a bit drab and rubbish. I was like, I hadn't even thought of that. So I think the big one is just forgive yourself, because you're probably painting a lot better than you would imagine when you're doing your World War II figures. So don't get too fixated on historical accuracy, and you'll still be absolutely fine.
Yeah, and I would say the other thing as well on that point is it's up to you, because it's your army at the end of the day, and there are those kind of people online who are the I think you'll find mob, and where whether like if you're in any of the bolt action kind of forums or Facebook groups or whatever, that picture you were talking about, where it's like there's 10 or 15 different German field jackets laid out and they're all different colors. And people use that as a response of, oh well, that's the wrong color green, what color green should I use for this? But the thing for me is, like, if you want to have a unit of German grenadiers that are manning the Atlantic Wall, but actually you really like the dark color schemes for your opals, paint them up in the dark color schemes. Why not? It's like, it's your army at the end of the day, and I don't think there's probably are some tournaments out there where you'll get points for historical accuracy of your units or whatever, but it's you get from it what you put into it, and it's your hobby. So I wouldn't worry too much about anyone going, oh well, that camo is wrong, or you've done that wrong. Or
I'll give you a leveler. This is the great leveler, right? I painted my Germans for bolt action, and there's a guy I knew who through Games Workshop was a customer, and I bumped into him and I said, "Oh, he did historicals." I said, "Oh, I'm painting a mid-war German army, and it's done on the German First Division, but the German 15th Division. It's around about Sicily. It's mid-war, about 1943, I think they were in Italy." And I showed him some pictures, and he went, "Oh, they're wearing jack boots. By that time of the war, they should have all been wearing ankle boots." And just off the cuff, I just went, "Oh well, actually, I did a bit of research, and actually, the 15th Division it's still been equipped and still had stores. So their depot actually still had stores, and they were equipped till late on in the war with jack boots over ankle boots, just because of the way the commander of the division, the general of the division, wanted them." kitted out. He said, because what they're still serviceable, so let's use them. Let's not waste them. And this guy was like, "Oh, I didn't know that." I went, "No, it's a complete lie. I just made it up, but you're completely happy with that fact that I've just told you." And it was the war. You don't know what units still had. There's not complete, you know.
I think the biggest takeaway from that little discussion there is it only matters if you make it matter.
Yeah.
You know, it's at the end of the day, it's a game. It's about you pushing, little dudes around a table.
It's toy soldiers.
You're playing toy soldiers.
It goes back to point one. Know who
Know
you're
who you're
playing
going to be
with.
playing.
So I think we've covered armies, we've covered rules, we've covered dice and things. That I think the other big thing that really I like about most war games, to be fair, but I love with bolt action is the depth you can get into the actual table.
Yeah.
Like the actual
scenery,
side of
scenery.
it.
How good they look.
Because that's one of the things I say. Like it's one of the big, and I think I mentioned this the other week when I was doing one of those review videos for the Micro Art scenery, Micro Art Studio scenery stuff. There are some gamers out there where terrain is a necessary evil that lets them get cover and get cover saves. And they don't want to. They want to spend the time getting the army tournament ready and playing it through to just defeat their enemy or whatever. They're not bothered about the scenery. Whereas I think nearly every single game we've ever played, especially of bolt action, our tables have already we've spent an hour and a half town planning. Oh well, there would be no reason to have a crossroads there. You need the crossroads here, and the town square would be here, and you'd have this farmhouse here, and we do all that because we want the cinematic appeal and we want the table.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice.
Yeah. Our bolt action tables are the best boards I've ever played on, and I haven't played as much as the three of you, but they are like the Peggy Bridge table. Now, it was a game that was just our forces were too big, and our German force wasn't designed to defend, which is what it was trying to do. So the game wasn't the greatest, but the board, it was just staggering how good the board was.
I'm very much.
Where we've got like paras running across in column across the bridge.
Yeah.
Following the jeep charge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It looked so good. It looked so good. But I mean, we spend hours and days and weeks painting these little dudes and these little tanks, to then put them on a plain blank canvas that's got no colour or character. What you put as much effort into that into the background as you do the foreground.
I think as well is and I'm going to sound like a crusty old fart here, but you don't know you're born these days because the stuff you can buy that's already pre-painted is incredible and it's cheap. I remember buying some World War II, a ruined farmhouse, like from a mail order company, and this was mid-90s. And the resin, when it turned up, I had two farmhouses. One was a farmhouse, one was ruined. And one was still tacky because the resin hadn't been mixed correctly. So I had to try and cut someone told us, coat it with talc and it'll dumb it down. And it did to a degree, but I just ended up with this ick all over it that wouldn't take it. They were awful. But now you get these beautiful MDF, like pre-built, like you put it together and it's just done, or it's all partially ruined for you. The effort to make a board look really good these days is really straightforward for not a ton of investment.
Yeah, I mean, considering you can, so as you say, jump back 15, 20 years when we first started gaming, and it was normally a green curtain. A green curtain stretched over some books. You might have either had some wooden hills where you've cut like discs or like odd shapes out of wood and stacked them together, painted them green, or
you've shaved the edges though. You've shaved the edges a little bit, maybe chamfered them.
2 boxes of Games Workshop medium trees.
Yeah, if you're lucky,
just loose.
If you're lucky, so I got a hold of a load of the blue insulating poly years ago, and we had a hot wire cutter, and me and my brother made some quite nice hills out of that. But again, they still looked, ropey. And you always have to there's always that compromise when you're doing hills for wargaming that you want a hill
versus look,
but it's always got that step terrace thing in it because you want to be able to stack figures on it. But the buildings that you had, I mean, we used to get art board, like foam card, and build
Foam
make
board,
buildings
yeah,
and stuff
yeah.
like that.
Foam board.
Or
I've actually got some upstairs.
there was a few, like I think Tamiya did a 132 Battlefield
Pillboxes,
accessories kit where you got like
sandbags.
your individual
Yeah.
bricks and you could build walls out
Yeah.
of individual bricks
Yeah.
and things like that and make rubble. And I mean, I remember going
In
to,
those little rubber molds,
yeah,
the little rubber
Well,
brick molds, and you plastic cast them.
there was those
Yeah.
which you can still get. I forget the name of those now. But there was, so I remember going to a convention years ago, and this must be late 90s, and buying some of the first resin cast stuff I'd ever had. And as Gary was saying, it was horrible, like urea formaldehyde kind of resin. So it stank of piss. It
Yeah.
was sticky. It wouldn't take paint. Like you would be scrubbing it for days with terps to get the,
Yeah.
and it was horrible stuff. And again, it was like, because it wouldn't take paint, it wouldn't glue properly. It wasn't designed very well. So you didn't have a mechanical joint. Like you just had like
Yeah.
two flat edges that you can't try to glue together, and
Yeah.
it was all wobbly because it was a bad cast. And you'd paid 25 quid for a couple of buildings, and you'd still have to dress all the base yourself, or like we used to use like cat litter and stuff like that to make rubble piles.
Yeah.
But now, I mean, considering you can go to a convention, chuck down 100 quid,
And you'll have a board.
you can make Carantan,
Yeah.
or you
Yeah.
can. You can buy like desert, like you can buy like like North African themed like get-ups where you've got like your tents, and you've got like your
There's terrain manufacturers as well, like the guys who do I've pre-built hedges for your bocage, I've pre-built these orchards, I've pre-built these fields. You can get some amazing stuff and for not much outlay, because we're talking and smiling away going, oh, I remember when I bought that resin farmhouse. And if we took a picture of those games now, you'd look at it and go, oh my God, that looks awful. It's terrible. The stuff that's just off the shelf now is unbelievable.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think we're dead lucky in the fact that we do a lot of research into this. I know our kind of chat groups so often. Oh, have you seen this? Have you seen this? Sharing products and things like this. So we are quite finger on the pulse about that.
Yeah.
And as a result, we've found some fantastic companies with some beautiful products out there, and thankfully, and we've been really lucky to have got our hands on some of them and to, put some of them together and use them in games. The Pegasus Bridge that Sven's got is a gorgeous bit of kit.
I mean, the reason why we're sitting here
stuff
tonight is because I bought Pegasus Bridge, and
Yeah.
we were like, oh, we should film this. We should film this.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Pegasus Bridge,
the scenic store stuff.
the Pegasus Bridge is one of those ones where I know it's going to sit on the shelf forever.
Yeah.
And the Horsa glider that came with it, we've used it several times just as a static piece to kind of as a theme, or like put some cinematography into the game. So we've got like, all right, here's a downed Horsa.
And I think it'll do us. It'll be a service to everyone if we can put as many of the links to the people we know and like down there as well. So if you have got this far through and you are interested in getting to bolt action and you want to start looking into figures and manufacturers and things like this, we'll try and put a big list down below there so you can actually kind of follow up on that as well.
And check out some of our videos, because we've reviewed a good. I mean, I don't
let's
think
put links to them as well.
I don't think we've hit a company where we've got stuff from them and it's been like, oh, this is just all right. It's all been brilliant.
If you use a bit of Google foo and just type 28mm World War II terrain, 22mm World War II wargaming figures, the amount of links you'll get is astounding, and it's well worthwhile trawling around and have a look at the stuff for you. Read some reviews. There's loads of people who will do the scale. Like, I love the Perry miniatures, but they're tiny bit smaller than the stuff you get from Warlord. And there's companies like Artisan and Black Tree, and their figures are enormous in comparison to the Warlord and the Perry miniature. So there's always going to be
Rubicon miniatures are a little bit thin compared to Warlord, and there's these tiny little discrepancies across the range in the market, but they all have their individual charms.
And if you used a full Rubicon army against me using half an hour.
I'm working on it.
Action, and Sven using half an hour. If we did that, it would still look great on the tabletop.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
so the first, because before we even got into playing bolt action, I was thinking about playing bolt action, and about 2, 3 years previous to that, just on a whim, I had bought the Warlord US Airborne Platoon box, where you got 25 metal.
Yeah.
You guys, so you got like a couple of squads and some like a bit of command unit, and heavy machine gun and stuff like that. So I'd bought that, and when you put those metal guys next to the plastics, the metal guys obviously look chunkier, but on the table from where you're generally standing, it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
I mean, we say when we did the comparison between Rubicon and Warlord, we did basically say the differences in the crew, and it's kind of like the heroic versus realistic scale, and that's kind of it
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, in terms of terrain out there, there's so many different companies who are specializing in doing stuff for different theaters,
Theaters.
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
even just different. So I mean, one of the we bought that stuff from or I bought that stuff from Take Cover, who
Yeah.
did got the flexible roads, and what we didn't well,
And those lovely bocage as well.
yeah, and like the Bacars sections he did, and they were all, not only were they all like handmade, but when I bought them, he emailed me saying, "Okay, what are you using these for?" And I said World War Two, and he said, "Okay, do you want a mix of like wheel ruts and tire tracks and tank tracks or what?" And I just said, "Okay, yeah," and I got some chance to like affect what I wanted, which is something you get like the handmade stuff. But as well as that, you've got, I mean, Scenic Store, who are now Scenic World, I think, on Facebook. Like,
Yeah.
early on, they started doing 28 mil scenery, but realized, okay, everyone's making stuff for Normandy. Brilliant. There's tons, like, so much. If you want to build a scale replica of every village in the north of France without repeating any buildings, you probably could with the amount of stuff that's out there. So they said, okay, there's lots of players that are doing the Eastern Front, so they started doing all that Russian ISBA style scenery, and we had a few of those buildings from them that we did, and they did a full range of Russian themed buildings, which
Mm.
up until recently I'd not really seen when Warlords did their Stalingrad box set that they did.
Yeah.
One big tip I'll give people, if you want to do a Pacific theatre or a Far East theatre, go to Wish and look for Wargaming jungle trees, and the amount of aquarium plants and palm trees that you could pick up for about 30 quid. You could pick up a 6x4 board and pretty much fill it with plants and trees, and with a little bit of dry brushing, primo. You just need to base them after that. And do you know what? You can look around and you get some good stuff. And that's beyond the people who are specifically manufacturing. So, yeah, it does build that look that you want for a game.
Yeah.
Because it's the thing, if you're going to spend, like you said there, if we were going to spend all that time investing in that painting, well, money, time, and effort in painting an army, then sticking it on a board that's just like a green curtain over some books.
Well, the other thing
You
as
know,
well is that just for something to play on. So in my games room, so I had my games table that I'd built a while ago, which is more for like table, like board games, because it's like the felt top. So I'd got those 2x4 sections of MDF, and I painted them green. And then just after I painted them green, we started buying double-sided game mats to play on. And the
Mm-hmm.
amount of companies that are now will do the 6x4 or 8x4 or 3x2 or whatever, um, or 3x3 or whatever, like actual the mouse mat material, the neoprene, like
Yep.
GameMat.eu and Urban Mats and P-Work. And again, for not much money, you can put down something which it means if you knock something over, it's rubberized, so things don't tend to clatter off it. They don't click, which you used to get when you had your mom's best green curtain on the table. Um, and they look really good. Like, they are like photorealistic printing on them. And
And a lot of them have terrain built in as well. You'll get road patterns
yeah, so we've got
and
one next
streets and
door that's
things
like
like
that.
this. Yeah.
And
I think we reviewed it on the channel, didn't we?
yeah, and the fact
Yeah,
you've got like the
we did.
double-sided one, so you can buy one and you've got two theaters, because you can buy, normally they do like a winter one and a summer one like back to back, or a desert one and something else back to back. And so you just flip them out over and you've got like lots of possibilities. And again, that was something we didn't have years ago. That, in fairness, I mean, some of these mats, the double-sided one might set you back like 70, 80 to 100 quid, but actually, do you know what? For
Not a lot in the long scheme of things. Is it?
something that's going to last you for years, and yeah, so I mean,
So
yeah, it's like so we've gone through. I think we've said players, a copy of the game, like
getting
materials,
started.
the actual,
Yeah.
armies themselves. We've said some terrain and some mats and things. So I mean, that's a good like. But I mean, the other things we kind of could mention about bolt action, and again, I think we kind of touched on this at the start,
Scenarios.
is the scenarios and the actual supporting materials. So you could just buy the basic rulebook and you get a handful of scenarios in there, like that you can play through. However, what bolt
They're very generic missions though,
yeah,
aren't they? In
yeah.
those.
Whereas what Waller are very good at doing is bringing out like the campaign books. Um, so they've done a few which are all based around D-Day. So you've got like Battleground Europe and Overlord, which was the one that's pretty much every single action of D-Day. And it
Yeah.
themes them so well, like the Merville Battery game. I really want to play that at some point.
Yes.
And I think we're going to be using some of those scenarios when we play our little D-Day campaign in the near
Yeah.
future. But
I'm
yeah,
really interested in looking at the Operation Sea Lion
yeah.
stuff
So
as well.
there's even Operation Sea Lion, Operation is it Gigant, which are the two
Yes.
kind of like what if Hitler had managed to invade Britain, and that's where you can kind of really push out things and have like a dad's army force running around with a great panjandrum and things like that, and you can have all of your tooled up like civilians and things like that, which I quite like the idea of. But yeah, I mean the campaign books are brilliant, and the fact that they're not just like here's a bunch of scenarios. Normally, here's a bunch of new theatre selectors. Here's some rules that support that, and obviously you can lift a lot of those rules out. So I think there's one of them that puts a lot of really good rules in for using like fixed emplacements. Like if you've got the Quick 39 from the Peggy Bridge box, there's one of the books that gives you all the rules for that, using emplacement weapons and how
Yeah.
to point them up, and there's one that gives you really good rules for how you buy and use barbed wire sections and minefield sections. So
And so some of them even let you recreate exactly some of those famous
yeah,
like the Merville Battery, in that you go through the force list and it's right. You've got Dick Winters, you've got Spearsy, you've
well,
got the
you've got like
etc. etc.
Operation XYZ, which is where I think you start the game with 10 US airborne, and you're going up
Yeah.
against a 500-point German force essentially with 10 US airborne. Um,
Yeah.
and
I
so
think the one thing that they do on some of the scenarios is they look unbalanced and unfair, but war is.
Yeah.
So because we've looked at some scenarios and went, is that all you get? That many figures, and they've got all of them. You're like, yeah, war is hell, guys. What happened?
And you think a lot of the scenarios are based on you're historically you've already lost this fight.
Yeah.
Mm.
So it's what can you do differently, or what do the dice do differently for you?
Yeah.
the
I think,
other
I,
thing
th- I, th-
I was going to say, the other thing the campaign books are really good for is to bring the characters to your army. So there
Yeah.
was the Operation Market Garden book that kind of had every single character that you'd expect from A Bridge Too Far. All the people who were involved in the Arnhem
It's
raids.
Digby Tatumwater
Yeah,
with his umbrella.
and you had Major the Sobiewski, the
Sosabowski.
yeah,
Sosabowski.
General
Gene
Sosabowski from the Poles.
Gene Hackman, as
Yeah.
we know him from the film.
Oh,
GG,
no,
as he's
that
known by everybody.
terrible accent. General Browning.
So
Awful.
yeah, so it gives you those to put in, which again,
And they're also really good historical references.
yeah,
They've actually put the work in to get the history
Oh.
right.
Yeah, do you know? I think Flames of War and Battlefront do that a little bit better. They're a little bit more researched. There's a little more detail, but I think this is why it lends over to Wallow keep the cinematics and they keep the broad facts and they don't drill down into too much of the detail, which is quite nice. And I think for a more casual gamer, it's brilliant. But I'm a casual gamer, but I'll heavily read up on my armies. I've read about Operation Market Garden. I've read A Bridge Too Far. I've read It Never Snows in September. I've read a lot of historical texts about it. I've done a little bit of online reading. I've read academical papers. I've read a lot of source material on it, and it was the first. It was the first operation of World War II that I really read up on. Things where you looked at things that you loved in Bridge Too Far, which I grew up watching and loved. I even went to the pictures. My dad took me to the pictures to see it so he could watch it, and I was a bit too young to watch it. And even reading up on the things that were done, like the guy who says, "Oh, I swum the Rhine," and it's like actually that's not what happened, and you know. But when you find out what did happen, they've took a lend in it, they've stretched things a little bit. But I think that's part of the fun of it for me. You get a lot of reading and you learn a lot more. Jesus, have I just gone down the learning is fun route? Jesus, I did want to
Pretty
do
much,
that.
yeah. I mean, so like
Yeah,
some of the campaign books have made me go out and read up on more of the actions that I haven't read up on. And obviously, I mean, I've been reading World War Two stuff for decades now, and what's nice, I guess, is that so meant like 8 year ago, myself and Ian and some of our friends toured some of the D-Day battlefields with one of the guys who was like one of the best tour guides in the business at the time. Um, he took us to like Brecon Manor, and we did the Band of Brothers tour essentially, plus some extra bits. And so then, having been on the ground and I've stood at the hedgerow at Brecon Manor and looked through to where the trenches were. Obviously, the trenches aren't there now. There's just like impressions in the ground where the trench systems were. But you see the size of that field that they were crossing under fire, and then you actually see that in the game, and you think, I've got a real good impression of how this plays out. So I like the historical accuracy that you get with some of the scenarios, even if they are a little bit, as you say, one-sided. Um,
I stood on Arnhem Bridge and shouted "War Muhammad," and it was brilliant, and it was a boyhood dream lived. Um, and it was fantastic. And you're right. When you go to these places where battles were fought, you do look at them with a different eye, and you think, "Bloody hell! How on earth did you survive this?
which is
How
something,
on earth did you get through it? It's amazing."
you'll never get the chance to go to Istvan 5 or whatever it is and stand there. Mainly because of the exterminatus.
I grew up in Coventry, so it's pretty close.
So
Istvan 5.
I guess in a way to start wrapping
Guide you.
this conversation up a bit. So yeah, obviously we talk about collecting armies and stuff, and I think it's one of the big things with us, especially is like we are a little bit prone to running
Hoarding.
off and collecting.
Bandwagoning.
Well, so I mean, I started off with the US Airborne, and I built up a couple of thousand points of US Airborne, but not a couple of thousand points that I could field at one point because of the way the theatre selectors work. I've got a lot of options, if you know what I mean. So I can switch in like a basic Sherman for a Sherman Jumbo or a Hellcat or a Wolverine
Firefly
or whatever.
yeah.
So I can switch those kind of things in and around. And then I've got a German force. That's the next thing I want to build and paint. And then also next door in the games room, I've also got most of a para force. Well, ox and bucks really, isn't it?
The
Because
Oxen Books.
for the
I mean, they were powers, technically.
yeah, I know, but I've already had someone on this channel give us I think you'll find they were the 52nd Oxen Bucks light infantry. So we've got so
All right,
I've got
back away.
a
Back
small
away.
force of those um that came with Pegasus Bridge that I've since bought extra bits to go with. I've got a commando force that came with Pegasus Bridge that I've since bought bits to go with, and I say I've got a probably best part of 100 and odd GIs there to make the big red one at some point. So I'm okay for armies at the moment. But I mean, for me, it's in terms of collecting. Like what I go for is, like again, I like the theming around movies. So obviously, Band of Brothers was a good one. Like the U.S. Airborne because I think they got a lot of screen time. And then I read some really good books about, various different actions. So like Damian Lewis, not the actor, the writer, writes some really good books. And so one of the reasons I wanted to do an LRDG section is there's a really good book he writes called Ghost Patrol, which is all about the well, it's the Special Operations Executive or LRDG kind of detachment, essentially pretended to be Germans. and drove around North Africa in a looted Opel Blitz, infiltrating German bases and doing them over from the inside. And I kind of really fancy doing an LRDG section and then taking the rules for the what they call the guys that were in the rules for them are in the Battle of the Bulge section of the books for Battleground Europe. They've got a proper name. I've forgotten it now. The Germans
You can say
address as
Brandenburgers.
Yeah, the Brandenburgers. So use
Yeah.
the Brandenburger rules, but for the LRDG. So there's bits of that make me want to theme armies, and like if Warlord ever come out with a book, like a campaign book that's based in Norway, where I can basically have the Telemark heroes skiing around the Hardanger Vidda, chased by Gebirgejäger. I'll buy that book, and I'll buy some Norwegian SOE guys straight away. So I'm very much along the lines of, I buy the armies probably because of books I've read or movies that I've seen.
Who's
What about
next?
you, Ben?
Oh, I'll go next then. The reason I picked Germans as my first army was so that there was a bad guy to play. It's the yin to the yang, the omega to the alpha, etc. They do look good, and they play really well.
Are we the baddies?
Are we the baddies? And it just comes back to that joke every day. And it was very much just a case of right, someone needs to have the baddies, otherwise it doesn't quite look right and it doesn't quite work. So that's where that started, and then I kind of carried on with that, and I've got a few thousand points of interchangeable Germans now that have various different roles. I have a very much an anti-armor force in there, and I've got a very anti-infantry, and quad 20s will do that. Horrible thing. And then after we'd got past that initial flurry of having to have the bad guys, it was and after I'd finished painting whatever I was painting for Ian, I was looking at what we're going to do next, and I always wanted to do Battle of the Bulge Americans, the Winter American Force, and so that's where I kind of moved next into doing that. One of the things I really wanted to do there was to kind of investigate some of the other miniatures companies out there. So although the minis are predominantly Warlord, all of the vehicles are Rubicon in my American Force. So, Shermans, with one exception, which was a Buffalo that Ian gave me. But then after I'd kind of got that Winter Force up to a decent scale, I started to buy some Summer infantry and some Summer airborne to go along with it. So I've now got an interchangeable Winter-Summer American army that to go together. And I want an excuse to do a Far East army. Possibly Anzacs. Possibly US Marines. I haven't quite decided yet. Yeah, that would be nice.
So what about you, Ian?
Mine's a lot more just... So the Commando Force started because I got the offer to get some minis painted for me and have a small force. I think after that, and once I had that, I started doing a bit more reading. And actually, one of the things I like about Warlord is they've kind of got their... I don't even know what you call them, their other pages on their website and someone had come up with the rules for 4-5 Commando, and like more specific rules to field an entirely Commando force, and they've gone, okay, these are good and they're not unbalanced, so they've been historically investigated, so we're gonna make these canon so you can use these rules. But it was just more that bit of reading and the idea of having like a small, very, very mobile commando force that would operate behind enemy lines. It's not going to win any of the games we play, but it's fun to play. It's like really small units, all in Bren carriers. So I don't think I've ever fielded it in its current state, but it's got about 6 Bren carriers there. a Stuart, so a really small light tank.
Love
And
Stuarts.
lots of stuff that just feels thematic.
Yeah.
My Winter Germans they came about from a strange, uncharacteristic moral moment that the game brought to me. As in originally, and it was just looking through, these miniatures look really, really cool. It was that kind of, you know what it's like when you just through. And I was looking at loads and loads of the different SS miniatures they had, and these miniatures look beautiful. And then I just had that moment where I was like, I can't build an SS army for a board game. I just can't. I can't actually do it. I could have a squad, but I could not bring myself to build just
The
because
SS
of what.
Leap standard.
Yeah, it was just too much. But it was at the time when all Warlord had like their metal Winter Germans, and I always liked them.
Yes.
The long coats, and I'd seen some cracking paint work done on them. Then they brought out the plastics. I think it was when they brought out the I can't remember which book it was, but it was the Battle of the Bulge?
Battle of the Bulge. It was the
It
Battle
is
of the
that
Bulge
bit.
book. It was the same time. It was me and you decided to do those winter armies at the same time.
And they just look. It was a pure look and feel thing. And I think the way you've painted, like, because I've got an early war Stug that's been painted up as this
Stugs.
rusty old heap that's just covered in, like, been daubed with white paint, and obviously it's been painted very well to look like that, but it's clearly been recommissioned from earlier in the war. And then a nice, clean, straight off the assembly line Panther.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
That's a naughty toy.
Yeah.
That Panther.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, for myself, for getting armies, I had a German army. It was just a German Grenadier force. And I got rid of it just because I was uncomfortable at having a German army or having the bad guys. It was just one of those where I was just like, I was just a bit meh about it. Really wanted to get some Brits. Really wanted to do airborne. Didn't want to get the metal airborne. But the plastic airborne came out at just the right time. Bought the plastic airborne. I've painted up a force which is just shy of 2,000 points, and I don't want to take it any higher because I don't want to go down the route of, well, now I'll have a squad on well bikes because I can, and now I'm going to have Tetrarch light tanks because that's what the airborne used. And so what I'm doing is that I'm adding some other British elements to it, but forward elements of the standard British army. So I'm going to have universal carriers from like recce formations. I've got it's not a Stuart, it's a honey tank, Ian. I think you'll find the British called it. We called it honey because it was such a beautiful, sweet tank. It got called the honey. He's googling away, going, "No, I don't think so." No. And I've got a Cromwell cruiser tank as well, and I'm going to add some more forward element things from what you would find in the what would link up with an airborne formation first. You know, not for any kind of cheese element, just fast moving British, and it's still all going to be lightly armored, unfortunately. So not a lot of hard hitting, but it's like you said, there's a lot of things that forgive that in the rules, such as having forward artillery observers and things like that that counterbalance that. And you know, that's what I got just for that great feel. And I've also bought and built, ready to be undercoated and painted, a huge Russian army as well. For just because I don't like myself. Is the main reason.
900 minis, isn't it?
Something like
about
that.
900 minis for about 270 points.
I've worked out two army lists. One is a Guards division, which is a bit more of a rounded out regular force, and one which I termed the Siberian Horde, where everything is 5-man units led by a corporal. And there are
one rifle between them.
There's so many dice. It's ridiculous. I can't just. It's insane. It's insane. I would feel awful fielding it, because it would just be an appalling gaming mess. But it would steamroll over everything just because of the sheer amount of dice it's got. Insane. But and also because you were fielding winter armies, and I thought, winter armies, I'm going to do something that's like autumny, kind of tundra style Russians with some snow on the base, not pure white bases. And so I could use the beautiful Warlord summer Russians. Fantastic models.
They are.
And then we can do some Eastern Front as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Or Fall of Berlin, because we talked about Battle of Berlin as well.
Well, I mean, I think I'm fortunate in that regard that my late war Germans will fit both Western and Eastern Front. So I can be a bad guy on either side.
So seeing as we've reached the Battle for Berlin, that seems like a nice tying off point, really.
Oh, that
for
was very
tonight's
stylish
chat.
you've done there. Well done, you.
Thank you.
You've wrapped that up a lot better than I introduced it,
But yeah, so I mean, I
Story,
guess
the story of this channel, that.
so. Obviously, as I said, as we said throughout this kind of episode, the plan is that we're behind the scenes we're working on putting together a little 3-game mini campaign that's going to be based around a Carentan style town in Normandy, somewhere maybe around Cabourg. So therefore, as we said, you can use both British or American troops on the invasion, and we're going to try and put together a linked campaign, like consequences style campaign, and the idea
D
will
plus
be
something.
that the idea will be that when we get out of lockdown, that we can actually get a table set up. We'll put that together and we'll film it and do some battle reports and things like that, and we'll get to show off again some of the terrain that we've accumulated and some of the armies that we've done. And as I say, we've talked about this before. We might do some little army showcases. We'll actually get the light box out and the little spinny turntable, and we can actually do some little showcases of our bolt action armies or whatever, as well as the other armies that we've got. If nothing else, just to get the dust off them. And as I say,
What I did the other day.
go back through and have a look through the channel, because there's tons of videos where we've covered various different bits of bolt action content. Because I know we looked at, obviously, Pegasus Bridge, we've looked at the Market Garden book, we've looked at various different models and lots of terrain.
Manufacturers,
we've looked at Scenic Store,
Lots
we've
of,
looked at all sorts.
JB
Yeah,
and
we've looked at all sorts of different things. And again, go dig back through the Facebook page and you'll find the battle report that we did at the beginning of 2019. When we did the battle for Unicorn
it
Bridge,
was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
which was one of our big all-day, way too big, way too many points games. But it was fantastic, and you'll see what we mean when we say about our like cinematically themed tables that we have. And I mean, I've got a big box full of terrain that I'm currently painting up and touching up, ready for the game. So hopefully we'll get some more stuff out on the table. So yeah, I think it's a good place to wrap up.
Yeah, wrapping up,
So,
isn't it? So,
I said check out
oh
the
god,
channel.
you can do this bit.
Yeah, go on.
Oh, I was going to do. Okay.
Check out the channel.
God,
Check out our videos. Hit the like, share, subscribe, notify bell all along the bottom here on YouTube. Hit the comments up. As I say, we'll try and put some links below in the description, but I'll also pop some links in the Average Tabletop Gamers support group. So we'll start linking off some of the bits and that we've talked about here. In the comments below, so I'll link some of the previous videos where we've talked about bolt action stuff as well. And obviously hit us up on Facebook, both the Facebook page, which is the Average Tabletop Gamers, and also the support group, which you can find, which you can go and chat and hang out with other gamers. And look at our Twitter, which is Average Tabletop, and of course our Instagram, and we'll get a bit more stuff posted on Instagram, because I know we're all feverishly painting away. Sorry, Ian, you're not.
No.
But we'll post some of his stuff up just as soon as Ben paints more of it. So
he
Come on,
he
Ben.
can take
Pull your
photos
finger
of
out.
his own stuff. He can take his own photos now.
Or we could do a video of teaching Ian to paint like he's some waif and stray.
Oh, you can
Oh
paint.
no, that'd
You
be
can
that
Ian
paint.
can paint quite well. It's just the fact that I painted like one
He has no
Steeler
desire.
cultist in the time it took Ben to paint 45 Germans to a
We can
higher
teach you to paint
standard
quick.
than the one miniature I painted.
We can teach you to paint quick, don't worry.
So,
That sounds like an episode for the channel.
Let's not. That'd be like one of those 1960s American experiments where they've got an orangutan at the piano.
How apt.
so I think it's a good time to sign off. So,
I think it is as well.
thank you everyone for watching. From me, Sven.
I'm
For
Gary.
me, Ian.
And I'm Ben.
Goodbye for now, and thanks for listening again to the Average Tabletop Lockdown Cast, episode 7.
Bye.
Bye.